There once was a mighty flood. Stop me if you've heard this one before. The waters were sent from Montana to scour Washington's land. Those before trembled at the torrent's roar. And then some hunters... Wait, that's copyrighted. So far on our Olympic-Wallowa Linement journey, OWL, we've talked about the structures, if you will, or the parts that build and make OWL. But what are the consequences of these structures? Today's adventure takes us to South Washington at the border of Washington and Oregon at the Wallula Gap. Named the Wallula Gap because it's near Wallula, and it's a gap. Please don't hurt me if I said it wrong. Which is curious because the Columbia River's coming through a pretty wide open section. Because the Columbia River has already punched a hole through Saddle Mountain up near the Priest Rapids Dam and below Vantage. You see here on my big old map from last time, after it comes through Saddle Mountain, it enters a pretty wide open area with not much relief. You've got the Yakima Fold Thrusts over here, but across Hanford and down to the Tri-Cities, it's pretty dang flush. Do recall from our last video that these ridges, Saddle Mountain, Horseheaven Hills, so on and so forth, are the result of knuckling thrust faults in the Yakima Fold Thrust Belt. And all things considered, the Columbia River's done a pretty dang good job at surviving everything we've talked about so far. This includes the exotic terrains, the Yellowstone hotspot, the Columbia River flood basalt, and glaciers. This geologic pinch point plays a pretty notable role in a pretty well-known story around here. The Ice Age flood story of eastern Washington. During Ice Age periods, large swaths of ice covered not just Washington, but parts of Idaho and Montana. And we're talking ice sheets that are in the terms of like 2,000 to 2,500 feet tall. And during these time periods, these ice sheets are blocking river valleys. So what happens when you put 2,000 feet of ice in front of a still flowing river? The sheer size makes some great big lakes. Flowing water is a fickle thing. So when you back up that much water, that high, behind ice, which is not a dam building material, eventually something's got to give. And when that giving part happened, chaos began. A series already done. The Ice Age floods created dramatic landscapes across all of eastern Washington. For example, here at Crescent Bar, annoying sister for scale. The waters tore up the land in an unimaginable fashion as it brushed downhill towards the low point. But what's the path? Well, the Columbia River already follows the path to the Pacific, so easy route there. But what's in the way? OWL. So while the Columbia River had cut the gap, there was so much water coming through this area that the low-lying areas behind it, not just in the Tri-Cities, would back up with water temporarily hundreds of feet deep for multiple days in a row during these floods. Note, a good majority of these lakes are based around this gap. And this little factoid too, these floods are thought to have happened anywhere from 40 to 100 times that we know of. It's crazy to think that the consequence of the Yakima Fold Thrusts, a part of OWL, creates this pinch point which creates these ancient lakes during the Ice Age. But I do want to take a moment to acknowledge something that I think gets missed sometimes. In terms of geologic time, these floods occurred less than a second ago. 10,000 years ago is not a long time. In fact, we know for a fact there were indigenous peoples that were in eastern Washington during these floods. I've mentioned before that in this era, we have the ability to live stream an event or prepare for disasters and make lighthearted videos about events like this. It needs to be said, people lost their lives during these floods. It is impossible to know what it was like to feel the ground shake, to hear the roar of that water, to see a 400 to 600 foot wall coming at you. And that's it. I ask you to remember stories like this because when you do research like this, it is important to recall that some of these events in terms of geologic time happen during humanity's time. These impossible events happen to real people. Skirt! You completely went over OWL, dude. Hold on, voice in my head. Although it is a valid point. Why is the gap right there? And how the heck did the Columbia River get through it? Well, you thought Western Washington was the only one capable of having big earthquakes? Well, guess what, LeGrand, Pendleton, Tri-Cities, Pullman, and Lewiston? You can get them too. But let's be honest, we could lose Pullman and be fine. On the next one, we're talking the Wallula Fault Zone and the Height Fault Zone.